How are you, David?
Yeah,
you well?
They know when I've entered the country. That's right. That's right.
Are you well?
Yeah, very good, thanks. Yeah, I mean, got a trip to Portugal out of the way. I've just finished 2 weeks of sitting at home waiting for that to go away, but I've got another trip to Portugal coming up on the 23rd. I just keep sucking up to 2 weeks. I'm just not going to be out and beaten by this rubbish.
No, I think Portugal's opening up, isn't it, again?
Have they announced that? I hope so.
No, but I know somebody in the Home Office that told me that.
If I hear that before I go, that's great, because although I'm working from home, it makes no real difference.
No.
It's just that much a burden you don't need. And, 1,500 people died in the whole country. That's less than Bromley. And yet we're not allowed to go there. It's absurd, really.
Absolutely. We did a podcast the other day with David Tait. Not your David Tait, sorry, David Buick.
Right.
Don't know if you're the City guy.
Yeah.
He's quite good. And he was on that. He said, David 76, bless him, and he was saying that, look, he said, I know I'm on the subs bench. If I'm going, I'm going. But he said, this is crazy what we've done. What have we done to ourselves here amongst all of this with this?
Could go on forever. I mean, I've never seen such economic suicide, unnecessary economic suicide in my career. I mean, when Boris made that announcement back in March, I remember, because my economics background major thing, is I just screamed at the TV. I said, you don't understand what you've just done.
Absolutely.
Did no idea. And I'm not surprised. I mean, he's not qualified. I think Rishi, on the other hand, has done a sterling job given the circumstances, but the repercussions of what it's done are, I think, very apparent to him. He's a Goldman alumni like me, and he gets that stuff. But I think what we did was preferable to what the Americans have done, which dump people literally with no money in the bank accounts.
Absolutely. If you saw those mass graves in the early days that were going on in New York there, here we would have been. I mean, the mainstream media, you can always go back to that. One quick thing before we start here, though, is what's incredible, and you just confirmed it again there. Boris and Rishi have become brands in their own rights, haven't they?
They have. I mean,
in terms of I actually start the sentence. My friend Rishi.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not surprised that Boris doesn't get the detail.
No.
He's under a lot of pressure, and I think what happened to him frightened him. And I think we're living with the consequence of that fright. But I think they had easy decisions to make at the outset. And I truly believe, and it's not with the benefit of hindsight or all that stuff, the decisions were relatively easy. They were four, even with the information we had back in the day. It was 1, do nothing, probably not an option. 2, keep old people home, you let young people go out. Sounds reasonable. 3, keep young people home, let old people go out, not an option. 4, shut the whole place down. Well, I know which one I would have chosen. And they bottled it and closed the whole place down.
It's very difficult, the backdrop, and where you've got so many. I can't believe there's so many levels of advice. Sage, Health England, obviously the National Health Service. I didn't know so many virologists in the world. That was incredible. One a day comes up with some scheme, most likely harebrained in terms of what we can and can't do. It just the noise, the white noise is phenomenal.
I thought one of the strangest decisions. I mean, I don't know about you, Terry, but if you take advice, I'll take as much as I can.
Absolutely.
In the role, you have to. And if you don't, you just consider an idiot. And so I canvass like you do, but if I'm doing something that's pretty more scientific, the bigger the catchment area of opinion you get, the more likely your outcome is to be correct. That's what I always assume. And the simple fact that they relied on one mathematical model from
Absolutely.
by that guy who got caught, essentially, and relied on that one alone was, to me, the most staggering intellectual decisions I've ever had in my life.
And when he comes back into play, he's saying there's going to be 500,000 dead as well. Suddenly, after he got caught,
he's got a history a mile long of saying these things are apocalyptic. Mad cow disease was going to kill 1 billion. SARS was going to kill 1 billion people, and yet we relied on that guy. Now I understand they're under pressure and they have limited time to respond, but still, you get 3 quotes for when you build a conservatory. You don't go with one, and this was a remarkable situation to me that I would have got everybody lined up, and pretty much I've gone with instinct plus the majority.
In my simple brain, who wants to be a millionaire? There's ask the audience question.
Essentially, you're going to get a reasonably good outcome. I mean, unless
you got a good chance.
Screaming red lights in your head that says that your instincts override it, and that happens once in the blue moon. But I saw lack of leadership, and all I've seen is a following. Dip your finger in the toe, see what the opinion polls are saying, or what.
Absolutely.
I hate that. That's not leadership.
It's reactive. It was, but it created the monster, didn't they? With the press conferences, and you got suddenly you got the level of disrespect from the mainstream media with it all. They were all just. The only thing that I thought was funny, was Robert Peston once asked a question. It took him 1 minute 48 seconds to get it out of his usual rambling and waffling. 1:48, and he finished. And Matt Hancock went, "No, have you got a second question?" It was like it was this TV goal. We're going to try and find it. Who's the leader? Thanks for helping us with this, Dave, as well. I'm just going to take a bit of your time. I know you've got to go off to the dentist there.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm up, good up till about 2:45, and then
we'll be done by then, I can show you. And thank you for scrubbing up, putting your shirt on, getting out the shorts and the flip flops to come on, because that won't be the look you need to convey. So I'll just give you a bit of an intro of what we're doing. So we're doing a series of podcasts which we use for marketing purposes. What we're trying to do is say, right, we're going to people who have an idea what they're talking about. We don't say they're experts. We don't patronise people in that sense, and it's an opinion. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through and say who and what you are. We're going to look at, I definitely want you to put across in terms of what's going on, how the Gold Council works, how COVID affected you, not necessarily overly personally, but in terms of lockdown, but the effects on the economy and gold price, which is relevant to you particularly. And then a bit about gold as a commodity. And they're going to ask you, we call it the Mystic Meg round, where it's your perception or how you think the economy is going to pan from here. And then we have, I wouldn't say it's fun, but we call it the I'm not a robot round. So one of the questions I'm going to ask you, and if you want, I'll take it out. When was the last time you took your plane up? So it shows you're a human being. You know when you do the questioning of I am not a robot. Okay. So that's it. And then that's about it, really. We'll just keep it relatively short, sweet, and say thank you again. How's the family before how we start? Family good?
Oh, very good. Yeah. Vanessa's gone for her first haircut in 4 months today. She's thrilled.
Is she?
She's going to come back a changed woman, I hope.
Yeah, very good, very good. The women have really been looking forward to having the FT. I was saying the other day, men would have been like this. I don't know if you were like this. I was walking down the road and saw there was a seat for free in a barber's. Rather than I can't wait for my hairdresser to open. There's a seat there. I'm in. I don't know who and what it was. I don't know where it is now. If I went back there, but that's the difference between us.
I've got my son to do mine with a set of clippers. I've got my first formal haircut tomorrow for what it's worth. Yeah, but, it's amazing what you've learned to do without and how we've adjusted.
Absolutely.
That's an interesting seismic shift. That's a big corporate decision going forward with regard to offices. I've got 5 or 6 properties.
Massive. There's almost like that. It's very trendy for it. The pivot of it, isn't it? It's incredible. Oh, yeah. When you've got the major banks in Belfast, Citibank aren't going back to August 2021 to the office. How they work that out, I don't know.
I do think there's a great opportunity here, though, Terry, and that's if you've got funds sitting around to go hunting, looking at all these office blocks. Areas you might like to live.
Absolutely.
The top third of those are going to become residential pretty quick, I should imagine.
Absolutely. As long as Boris can get his planning thing through, then we'll all go from there. Right, I'll get us going if that's all right. So I'm just going to give a brief intro, David, and then we're going to sort of talk a little bit about you. I'm going to touch on because one of the things we say, we talk to people who've overcome hardship, and obviously I'm going to touch a bit on your story, lead that into Sulphur and White. Then from there, if you can tell us how Sulphur and White's going, and then we'll just go with the flow. Not a great deal of format. Fortunately, we've got some guys who can edit this carry on, so that we'll nearly get it into some semblance of sense, and we'll crack on it.
I'll respond to your questions and go from there.
Absolutely, that's cool. So, welcome. We call this podcast, David, Real Time. This is the Real Time podcast. It's Bell and Company who are issuing a series of these podcasts to help people try and decipher what's actually going on out there. We're talking to experienced commentators. These people are generally in life doers. They're positive in nature in the main. They've overcome hardship, and essentially they're out there still doing it and still achieving. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome David Tait MBE. Good morning, good afternoon to you, even David. How are you?
Very fine, thank you. Very good. Very hot.
Good. Very hot. It's warm here, but not that warm. I know you're getting it pretty bad in the south there. But David, I have to write, excuse me, I've had to use a list because you've got so many achievements and so many roles that you have in life. So I do have to refer to that. I think the thing that pays the bills at the minute, you're the CEO of the Gold Council. Very importantly, and our association to you with it is through the NSPCC. You're the trustee there, ambassador. In terms of your involvement with the NSPCC, when we heard your story, that's when we got involved about 4 years ago. in your life, you've overcome huge obstacles, not least in your childhood, and then which I only picked up in your film, in your early adulthood particularly. And because you've had such a compelling, not necessarily compelling story, that would be the wrong phrase, but it compels you to watch the film, your story, the film that is Sulphur and White, which is, I think it was released early this year, David, eventually, after all the cuttings on the floor.
It was absolutely released in February.
Okay, and how's that gone? I know obviously had COVID would have interrupted the airings of the film.
Well, we obviously were all a little bit let down when Boris shut down the cinemas, but at that point we'd managed to release in nearly every man cinema, which was a great feat of achievement for us. I'm frankly expected to see it in such a mainstream forum. The problem is that we were just about to be picked up by Odeon and broader screens when they shut down. But in many ways, you could argue that being transferred to digital and immediately onto the platforms, which you had to accelerate, could have been quite fortuitous, because you just really didn't know whether you were going to have exposure. So suddenly we found ourselves pitching against to Netflix, to Amazon, to all the major platforms. And we've managed to achieve exposure on every single one, with the exception so far of Netflix. For Peculiar, we can't really fathom out why we haven't done that. And funny enough, only today did we reapply to become part of the Netflix family, which is useful.
Correct.
Useful in as much as it's a global platform. And that's the difference.
Yes.
And, but frankly, we're on everything, and we just secured an airline deal as well. And I'm hoping it's not an exponential style Bond takeoff.
No.
It's far more a slow burn that I hope becomes embedded in inventories over time.
And you've attended mostly premieres when you've got. I know we saw you in Belfast that evening on a snowy evening in Belfast. You've been doing the tour.
Every single one, every single cinema that showed it, I was there, and I managed to give a speech before and after to give it context and also an explanation afterwards, and see if anybody was still talking to me afterwards. That was always an interesting litmus test. But yeah, the main premiere in London was lovely, and Her Royal Highness was there, and it was a fantastic night. The dream now, straight after that, was lockdown.
Yeah, I inappropriately was compelling, but what the film does do, to my mind, so your speech when I saw it back in Belfast 4 or 5 years ago, that compelled us to do something at Bell and Company, and the film compels you as because it's still that sort of taboo subject, no matter what's going on in the world. Yes, everybody's aware the horrific stuff that occurs to children here, but the film further compels you to A, be aware of it, and B, if you can, do something about it. I think that's very important. I know that's very close to your heart in terms of the work you do with the NSPCC.
Mm-hmm. It was really what I wanted from the film was a little bit more than just telling people another abuse story. What I really wanted was to open the debate again, such that people, the mental struggle that comes from, or the mental damage that comes from a physical abuse, and wrap those things together. I think people are able to clearly get over physical things. In that moment of physical violence, your mind shifts, your mind alters, and as a consequence, your interaction with everybody throughout your life takes on a different color, a different hue. And yes. What you do, you can consider your existence to be a never-ending nuclear bomb that has a huge shelf life and affects many people who you love dearly throughout their life, to the extent that you generally cause more damage than you ever do good. I finally reached a point where I managed to cross over that line and start to compensate people. But I wanted this film to be an all-encompassing story that showed all the multifacets of it, not just the childhood thing, that was a minor part really, but all the other horrors that you inflict on others during the course of your life, such that people out there might be able to refer to it and say, now I understand why the person I live with, I knew, my brother, my sister, my father, whatever it might be, were the way they were. There are no excuses, and I don't believe that you should hide behind it, which I did for a large number of years. Stepping out from behind it, I think, is important, and not expecting others to make excuses for you, which is what many people did for me. Luckily, I've got this stick insect of a woman who was bulletproof and stuck with me through everything. And I'm immensely grateful.
Just so that everybody knows, that's the lovely Vanessa that demonstrates that David's batting way above his average, just for reference.
Absolutely true. But known to me as whack-a-mole. No matter what I did, I couldn't stop her standing back up.
Couldn't shake the woman off. Say from the film, David, the one I think I did get, and it's where it did show where it's a bit rude here. You were a car crash as a young man. And it's how it did affect your early adulthood, which was depicted in the film. And it's, I think that's important because the as you say, the psychological effect back to the time life of nuclear waste, as it were. That's very hard to if you can't even understand it. You don't know where it's coming from. I'm sure. When's it going to ruddy end? That would be the thing as well in the backdrop.
Yes, I mean, I left, my teenage years were a mess, but I kept that very much under my own hat. But when I joined Goldman Sachs very early in my career, almost my first job, I was young and I felt invincible, but in a sense that was not conceited. I just didn't care, frankly, whether I lived or not. So I wandered into that job of taking huge amounts of risk for Goldman Sachs, and I was able to do it willy-nilly. Others would freak out. I was able to do it without any effort at all.
Did the film depict that correctly, Dave? Because you nearly looked dangerous.
We tried to depict it as someone who just really was always pushing the boundaries, and I was. But I did it because I didn't feel the fear, because when you've been to such a place, it's hard to feel threatened by numbers on a piece of paper. Whereas I watched others around me suffer immeasurably by the threat of losing their job. I didn't care whether I lost my life, let alone lost my job.
I was going to say, the emotion of fear was almost like dragged out of you, as it were, sort of thing.
I grew to fear things. That's the irony. As I got better, as I got more human, as I started to understand that I didn't want to lose it, and there was a point in the film that depicts that turning point where I get stopped from doing something ludicrous to myself. I realized then I didn't want to let what had happened to me get me anymore. As I say in my speech, I didn't want to hide behind it like a shield, and I was going to use it as a weapon. And in that moment, I turned it. When I sat in that police cell, I turned my life around, or I made a decision not to let it affect me anymore. And it hasn't been a clear sailing, as it was clearly depicted. But eventually you reach a point where you feel that you put it behind you, and you think about it every day, but it doesn't have that huge steel lead blanket, doesn't alight on you anymore. You're able to walk and look through it.
And then it shows, Dave, how that sort of pivots, as I used that trendy phrase earlier, into your, I know belittled them and said efforts with NSPCC, but your work with the NSPCC. Again, pulled me up on this because we're relying on a couple of facts on the internet. And I know you've climbed Everest 5 times, David, is it 5 times?
5 times, charity.
And in terms of be a bit crass about money, raised over $1.5 million so far for the NSPCC.
Direct fundraising, They're the emails which I've sent out to all my long-suffering contact lists.
I knew the word suffering was coming there.
If you add up the speeches and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, just I think it's not blowing smoke here. It's amazing when we do. You've kindly come to Belfast twice to support us and our efforts, and you pick up your own tab, which is a measure of the man. We could have obviously organised a hotel and everything else, but you get there, turn up in your well-worn dinner suit and turn up a bit brilliantly. And then the recent one, you up and down Box Hill 40 times.
Yeah, so if I was brave enough, I'd show you my toes. But I did it 40 times. The charity came to me. It was a little bit of a half-baked idea, I admit. And not me, they're planning on this one. And we've had conversations about it. But yeah, it was an idea of under lockdown, do a climb, raise some money for the charity of any description. They asked me to front it up. And so I said, okay, I'll try and do an Everest distance. And so I knew I had Box Hill near me, which is 214 meters. And I divided 8850 by 214 and it came up with 39.5. So I said, I'll climb the thing 40 times. And I said, is that
the hill that was used in the Olympics, the cycle? One of the cycle events?
Yeah, but on the back side of it, there's a set of stairs, which is like pretty much 50-degree stairs. So you didn't go up the road, you just went up the stairs.
Stairs up there.
Hard. And so I set off at midnight and I finished at literally midday on the dot. I didn't plan it to be 12 straight hours. I thought it was going to be 13. But what got me was coming down. My poor old toes. I've lost every toenail off every my feet. Yeah, they're all.
So you're going for the haircut. You're not bothering with pedicure today.
Even a pedicure wouldn't go near these feet, I'm afraid.
We're doing something, David. On the back of this, there's another guy I listen to quite extensively, a man called David Goggins. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He had a terrible childhood and threw himself into the SEAL battalion in the US Navy, and he does an event. We picked it up, Noel, myself, and two other, D'Amelia and Iona in the office. And it's not Box Hill by any stretch, but every 4 hours you've either got to run or yomp 4 miles. For 48 hours. You've got 12 at it, so that's the thing. So the younger ones be fitter than me. I know they're going to be absolutely incredibly hard work when they get sleep deprivation. I think there's going to be all sorts of toys going to come out the pram, but it's a challenge. We just picked up. We had Joanne McMaster the other day, and she's changed the name to the Power of 4 because she wants to take it back to the fact that every contact with the NSPCC costs £4, so 4, 4, 4, 4, 48. So we've got the brilliant timetable where we're doing everything, and an hour after we finish, the big words in large letters are pop. So it's, but we're off on that at the end of September. So it's not Box Hill, and hopefully our toenails will survive. But we're doing our wee bit there. So we'd turn on, David, then if we could, a bit to your professional career. So you're the CEO of the Gold Council, and when we were fortunate enough to have dinner with you when you came over to Belfast, there you gave me a bit of a backdrop as to what the Gold Council does. But for our hopefully both our listeners, you could tell us a bit more about the Gold Council and their role in today's world, because gold is obviously up there. It's the safety, it's the bellwether, it's whatever it is. But your role in the Gold Council and what the Gold Council does, can you give us a bit of a backdrop to that, please?
Yeah, sure. Well, the World Gold Council is the market representative body essentially for all the main miners in the world. And there are about 30 to 35 main gold miners, from Barrick at one end right the way down to Hummingbird at the other end. There's small ones, China, all globally based. And so basically I'm responsible for making sure I represent them, all the CEOs, they're my people, and I make sure that the gold that comes out of the ground from the mine goes to the correct refiners, the right standards, it goes to the right contractors, goes to jewelers and comes out the other end in gold bars. And any form of gold that you'd like, whether it be investment, jewelry, or anything, I'm responsible for. Coupled with that, the World Gold Council back in 2003 invented what was a gold-backed ETF, exchange-traded fund. And they did it, frankly, on a whim all those years ago, 2003. But within a month, it became the largest ETF in the world, with assets under management around about $80 billion.
Right.
The assets under management declined down to 28 billion. And when I took over, it was 28 billion, and this was January 2019. We now, as of last Friday, went through 87 billion again, largely through virtue of the fact that we are doing two things. One, people, as you rightly say, like buying gold as a hedge against other investments, and we can come on to that later. And secondly, we, under my leadership, are getting out in front of institutions, many of the main institutions, whether it be Goldman Sachs through to BlackRock, you name them. We've got a sales team now which are built in each center around the globe, explaining why you should have gold as part of a balanced portfolio, because it acts as a risk mitigator, a diversifier. It actually has a calming influence on the fund as well, and over time really does actually improve returns of a normally balanced fund. So basically, a lot of institutions have not either have understood that in the back of their mind, but most of them have not been allowed to invest in gold in any form because of the capital implications of holding the product. The product is technically risky compared to other products, for instance, foreign exchange and, let's say, US dollar swaps or treasury bonds. And the reason because of that, the reason it's like that way, is because the structure of the London OTC, over-the-counter market, the manner in which you can buy and sell physical gold, is so antiquated, so backward, you need a DeLorean to go and figure it out. It's really, really poor. So I was very lucky that I blundered into this role, essentially, with a wealth of experience on how to deal with that capital world. And as I was being interviewed to be employed, the then chair of the World Gold Council said to me, look, we think we need to get in front of these institutions. How do we do it? And why hasn't it been done in the past? And coming from Credit Suisse at the time, I knew full well that the reason we didn't invest in gold trading and stuff was because it was too expensive to trade. Our return on capital was too low, so we parked the money elsewhere. So I knew I had to solve that conundrum. And now I'm chair of the Bank of England Precious Metals Working Group. I'm also on the main Bank of England board as well. And one of my strands is to reform that market to such an extent that it has high layers of trust and transparency. And as a consequence, slowly these institutions, the capital requirements, or the risk comes down, the capital risk comes down, and they will slowly invest in.
I got you. So it's still the physical element. It hasn't. If you look at all the different financial products and derivatives out there, they're quite easily backed by stock. Is it still an element of it about the physicality of gold and how you deal with that as well?
Yes,
in terms of storage.
Yeah, most
the capital requirements.
Yeah, most of the capital restrictions are imposed on the physical elements of gold, on the physical side of gold. An ETF is an exchange traded fund. It's listed, so it actually carries no capital requirements. But anything physical is hard. And so if you think ETFs are only 1 to 2% of that gold market, you see that the main problem sits with the physical stuff.
Yes.
As an aside, our ETF is fully gold backed, literally. So we have 100,000 gold bars with HSBC. It's quite a remarkable amount of gold bars when you see it. I've been there, it's quite stunning to see. But yes, trying to reform that market. As an example, if I could try without blinding everybody, the London foreign exchange market keeps a record of every single trade going back 20 years, simply put. Right? So at any time, you can go back and test how the market responded over a stress period, whether it be 2008, whether it be something else, whether it be COVID in the future. You can go back and have a look. For some reason, the gold market in London kept no records until the beginning of 19. Beggars belief, doesn't it?
Incredible.
So when the Basel authorities, and for those of your listeners have heard of the Basel 3, Basel 2, Basel 3 regulations coming out as a consequence of 08, when the Basel authorities tried to take a good look at the gold market, they had nothing to look at. So simply put, they denied gold the right to be a high quality liquid asset, even though it's very liquid. They denied gold to be treated like most other financial products because they had nothing to look at. And the net stable funding requirements, which are coming out in the middle of next year, gold's going to get a haircut or a penalty, is probably the best way to describe it, of 85%. Now put that in context, if I wanted to lend, if I was a bank wanting to lend, make $100 million gold loan just to XYZ company, I've got to hold $85 million of tier one capital aside against that.
To support that.
The return on capital has to be phenomenal to make it worthwhile.
I think the timing of it as well, when you see, I was reading the FT at the weekend and they're talking about the property funds and they're putting in that 6-month notice period now, because I think, and it's almost as though it's not, but it's almost like gold is a new product, isn't it? Where you didn't have those records, it's almost trying to say, right, okay, let's bring this into the mainstream as a technical and also physical monetary asset. But you've got that backdrop of people want that liquidity, don't they, as well? And if that's a challenge.
It's very there are two sides to the world. I think about it. At the top half of the page is the institutional world and gold, and there's the financial products of ETF. There's physical, but there's also the retail world. For instance, there's you and me wanting to buy the stuff. If you go on the internet and try and buy gold now, you get everything from Sharps Pixley, which is a fantastic firm, who can buy you can buy gold bars from and store them in safety deposit boxes if you want to at very low cost. Alternatively, at the other end of the spectrum, you've got the Arthur Dailies who rock up in 1960 Jags with trilbies and stuff and have gold in their pockets. And, you've got everything. And so, as a consequence of that duality, the FCA have a warning on the front of their website that said, "We advise you don't buy gold on the internet because," and they use the phrase, "it's a scam." So when I set out to try and reform all this, I had a conversation with Andrew Bailey and Andy Haldane and Mark at the time, and said, look, if I manage to sort this out and instill structure and standards and everything, will you take that down? And they said, you do that, we will, absolutely. And so we issued what's called the Retail Gold Investment Principles, and guidance late last week, which is going to be a global initiative. Because, as an example, the World Gold Council polled 18,000 people the other day, members of the public, and 48% of them said they wouldn't buy gold because they didn't trust it. That portion of the market that actually buy gold is a $40 billion a year market. So if I can get the rest of them to trust it, it's an 80 billion, if not greater.
Yeah.
It's a huge body of work, but there's really clearly two sides. There's the institutional, which has huge assets, far bigger than the retail, but I'm doing the retail as well. And we have offices in London, New York, Mumbai, Delhi, Beijing, Shanghai, and Singapore. And I was rotating regularly between them until someone took my plane away.
Not your plane, not the plane, a plane. That's brilliant backdrop then. That's brilliant end of the way that's put up, because it still does have slightly there. It's back to Michael Caine, you know, just take the bloody doors off. You know, it still goes back to gold, doesn't it? So it's just, he said it could be, but it's out there, and so that's sort of the Gold Council. Thank you very much for that backdrop. Then it's a little bit that I'd like to discuss is obviously with the COVID-19 and the effect then, not just on gold. I'm particularly keen on your insight in terms of where we could possibly go as an economy here. But with gold, in my simple brain, I think it's gone through $2,000 an ounce now. I don't know the actual price at the minute. It is the go-to. It's that strange anomaly, isn't it? We're talking about Arthur Daly's and the FCA coming up with what they're saying, but it's still the go-to safety net, if you like, when things start to cut up rough in the economy. So how do you see gold sort of, not, you can't predict, but what did you have research guys say? How do you see gold sort of going as an asset?
Well, we have a unique situation, and I know that's a much used phrase, but this really is. In 35 years of trading, I've never seen anything quite like this.
No.
Just to rewind a little, historically, areas of the world have been doing well where other areas have been doing badly. We've always had this. Areas like the US has been the powerhouse of the world, or China's been the powerhouse, etc. And we've sort of shared that responsibility around us. And so central banks and governments have been able to exchange their debt. Governments have been able to lend to others with impunity, and others have needed to borrow with impunity, etc., etc. And this has been a free-for-all of passing this money through capital markets. But what's happened recently, obviously with COVID, was almost simultaneously the entire world shut down their production. So essentially, their revenues, whether it be tax revenues or of any shape, died a death overnight. But at the same time, simultaneously, they trebled their debt, most of them, in the same moment. So every country, irrespective of where it was in its cycle, was level set, and they all did the same thing. So we're all perfectly in sync at the moment. The problem is that these governments, who normally sold and exchanged their debt to finance their deficits and surpluses and shortfalls, all have deficits that have trebled. So they're all looking to someone to fund it. But of course, there's no one there. So what they've had to rely on is their own central banks to print the money. And that is unique. And that is why the dollar has been falling. Currencies are largely being undermined and being debased, which is always a criteria for people to buy gold. And literally, without exaggerating, the world is slowly meandering towards a situation where it's seeing this for the first time. And gold literally becomes almost the only alternative to some, and increasingly so. And it's in a slow rise at the moment, but I can see a situation when the world wakes up, hypothetically, if one country doesn't start suddenly recovering quickly and becoming the powerhouse that drags everybody out of that malaise. It's almost like a musical chairs moment where you all stare around, you all know you've printed as much money as you can, and no one's going to pay it. What do you do? And no one's got an answer for that, and I haven't either.
No, well, it goes back to, you mentioned 2008 there, and I was fortunate enough at that time to have the ear of John Goodfellow, who was the chairman of Skipton Building Society, who's also chairman of the Building Society. John's passed away now, bless him, but he was just a straight-speaking Glaswegian. And he gave the scenario then. The situation was this. He said it was all about wooden dollars. Okay, so it was pretend money, and it was pretend money in the morning in Tokyo. That pretend money then came to London, then it went to New York, then it went around to Tokyo. You know, so he said, where did it go wrong? He said, some bastard, and that was the actual language he used, had the temerity to ask for the money back. And he said, And that was it. He said, when you get major banks, I think you may have mentioned somebody's name earlier, when you've got a to-do list on a Monday morning, it must at that time find $12 billion. It wasn't a great start to the week. And it goes from there, and you say, right, that's where that panned out. Now we're trying to look, like you said there, we're taking on literally trillions of debt in the US, trillions of debt. We won't be far off, I'm sure, by the time Rishi's finished. And we're doing it on the backdrop or the excuse, or you like the ability to do it at zero or possibly negative interest rates. But how long can that go on, do you think? How long? And it's a tough question. But when will somebody go, tell you what, no?
Well, that's the scary thing. I don't think anybody knows that question.
Mm-hmm.
Technically, you can keep printing this stuff, and the balance sheet of the central banks can keep expanding. But we all know something will trigger a fear.
Yeah.
Something will go wrong. I think what will happen, what could happen, is that if we get a recovery at some point, you end up with a supply shock, where you suddenly get a surge of demand, but because the supply lines are being so constricted, you get a surge in inflation. If you get a surge in inflation in a scenario like this, because if you do look around, things are going up in price quite a lot. Fuel is up 20% since. When
do you pay for your haircut tomorrow, David? When do you pay for your haircut?
And if you do have that, having had the supply chains restricted because you've got half as many people doing stuff, because you've got social distancing and stuff like that, but a supply shock, you have a rapid increase in demand, you're going to get such a quick surge in inflation that the governments are going to have to try and respond to it. The biggest threat to those governments responding to it is to themselves, because they will have to fund their own debt. And
absolutely.
The cost of funding their own debt will be so astronomical, they'll never be able to pay it off. The best thing they want is they'll probably let inflation run then, because they can make their way out of some of that.
Absolutely.
But that's back to the original question, which is, at what point does that merry-go-round stop, that giant Ponzi scheme? And I use the word carefully, but when we're printing our own money to keep ourselves going, and we're not actually every central bank around the world is doing literally the same thing at the same time, who calls time on that?
Absolutely.
It's quite an amazing scenario.
Yeah.
I've never known
that's the potential big panic. And you say there's so many mitigating factors, the desire for inflation from some governments, which they'd never admit to, so they can help control the debt. Somebody said the other day, and David, you're the same sort of age as me, it was a bit like when you used to work in the city, you part of your package was you got some luncheon vouchers. And when you first started the work, your 25p luncheon voucher was quite handy. By the time you finish work, it was, does somebody want these? It's just almost like too much trouble to keep in your pocket. And it started off, it's nearly useful. In the end of the crappy bits of paper, you may as well stick in recycling. I think we're sort of unfortunately heading towards that thing. So hopefully not. By the way, when we do this thing, we try not to come from a negative angle. We're just trying to say, we're trying to put across what could happen here. It's definitely not. I think you're in terms of your demeanour, you're a positive person. I'm a positive person, but the backdrop is trying to work through to see how it works, because it's nearly imponderable here. So as a commodity, David, gold. So we touched on it slightly there. If I wanted to get involved in investing in gold, I'm not asking for financial advice. Do I? What are the options? So you've got the physicality, a couple of, whatever it is, some jewelry or a piece of hammer. What would a bar of gold cost, Dave, roughly? I don't even know what a bar of gold weighs.
Well, they come in all shapes and sizes, from 1 gram you can buy in India, right the way through to how big you go. The standard bars that you see in the Bank of England are 400 ounce for some reason, but the main decimal one in the rest of the world is a 12.5 kilogram big bar. But really the most tradable in the Eastern world, they're increasingly popular, is the 1 kilogram bar. And that's, for instance, the 400 ounce bars are around about $600,000 at the moment, as an example. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
But so the options are what? Could you just talk us through if you want to get involved in
yes, I mean, you can buy physical gold in many places, well trusted places, and I can't literally tell you those places.
No,
it's not within my remit. But there are places. I did mention one earlier. There's a shop on St James's. You can buy one, and well trusted. I know everything about that shop. You can do that, and basically you can put that in a safety deposit box. You're literally taking your cash out of the bank, you're transferring it into gold, you put it in a safety deposit box, and the fees for keeping something in a safety deposit box are de minimis, really small. And that's what most people do. The alternative, obviously, is the ETF, the exchange traded fund, which you can buy and have part of your pension, or you can have part on, you can buy it on an iPhone now. And you literally, you know, like AJ Bell, for instance, you can go in there and buy ETF, and you can put as much as you want or as little as you wanted it, and it trades like a future. But the good thing about, for instance, and I've got to say, for instance, GLD, which is our ETF, that huge one I told you about, ours is gold backed, and you have to make sure it's gold backed. I mean that literally down to the microgram. Your gold is accounted for in a vault somewhere, and you can redeem it. You can redeem it. There are futures that you can trade as well, which are more speculative instruments, which are of course not gold backed, but you can deliver on these things at certain points in the future, but very, very, very few, less than 1% of futures ever deliver into physical gold. They're spec instruments. So, you know, if you go to China, for instance, Chinese people buy gold culturally as an investment. When you go into which is bemused me when I first saw it, when you walk into a jeweler's store, and they are amazing. They're football pitches. On the wall are Bloomberg screens with the gold price. And so when you walk up to a piece of jewelry, if you buy a bangle, a very simple bangle with little work in it, that you get charged the gold price plus 5%. Flat rate. So the markup is a fixed thing. And so you price the price, and you can go back and sell it for the gold price minus 50%. And that bid offer spread is what you do inside shops, which is quite interesting for us. And another example is the more intricate it is, the bigger the markup, but the markup is limited. So you know where you are all the time. So they use it as something to adorn themselves, as do the Indians, but as a physical investment in the future, an alternative to money, which they love. The other side of the world, us, we tend to embrace the institutional investment, but we don't really do the retail thing. I mean, why rush off to buy my wife a piece of jewelry for, throw a number out there, £1,000? The real jewelry value of that is probably 10. But I'm buying a name on it invariably. And I think there is scope for the Western world, from a retail perspective, individuals like you and I, to walk in and look at that as a straight gold price. Okay, this bangle weighs 50 grams, it's worth 4,000 quid, etc. And then your wife can wear it, and you look at it in those terms, because get away from it again, of course, or you put it into a safety deposit box, and you slowly transfer your wealth into physical gold, which is what we're increasingly seeing, especially in this period, the pandemic period. I expect two things. If we do find a vaccine, God willing, if we do, I expect to see gold decline. Not much, because if we have been doing our job correctly, we've got in front of enough institutions to make it endemic, make it a fixed part, almost like a robo fund. Funds, you can have the boxes you can allocate to. Eventually, gold will be one of the boxes that will be grayed out, because it will be an implicit part of a portfolio. Because if I've managed to squeeze down the capital reasons, it'll be
and it's getting balance in the portfolio, isn't it? So typically if your shares do take a hit, your pension's hit, then the gold will come back and give it some sort of redress and balance.
It's counter-cyclical things, but it's this great diversificator and a balancing item. And interestingly enough, it also reduces your VAR, your value at risk, your volatility.
When we see some of the financial products out there as well, when you see them, you know, how far away they are from the ultimate asset, when you see sort of stuff that's going on there, we're seeing it in the finance market now as well, where you've got the peer-to-peer funders, sort of not in any way decrying, but the number of types of peer-to-peer finance, people paying their tax on peer-to-peer finance and stuff like that, and it's that sort of thing where it's a type of lending. It's a bit like some of the financial products are a bit edgy, not the peer-to-peer, but that are out there, you know, the derivatives. So it's a type of financial product, but gold is there, as you say, it's almost like a mainstay, isn't it? If it's treated and given the respect it deserves now.
It's been around longer than anything else. There are also apps now and companies now, again, I can't mention names, who actually have physical backed gold that you buy and is kept at a vault, trusted vault, but that you can exchange via Barclaycard. So if you walk in, you want to buy a Starbucks,
Right.
it'll convert an equivalent gold, and the gold gets sold and translates into dollars on your app.
Right.
That's coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's literally you're buying and selling with gold.
Wait, gathering.
The shop sees you tap, but it's being transferred out of your gold holdings versus your bank account, which has got pounds.
That's quite cool. I'm interested. I've got one of those ones where you round up. That'd be interesting. That so we can gather up over time.
Yeah,
if Mrs. Bell gets hold of the credit card, we'll be very wealthy in gold terms by the end of the year. That's for sure.
But the advantage of having an account like that is that you're taking an implicit view on. It becomes a speculative instrument too, because technically you can take your entire salary or entire chunk of money that you want, and shove it into gold and trade and spend off that. But at the same time, in the background, of course, it's going up or it's going down in the back of your mind. Whereas the money sitting in your bank account, largely speaking, is earning nothing.
Yeah, absolutely nothing. So on that, you did a wee gesture there. We did a bit of a chart. Sorry, gold, where you thought that'd go. So we were talking to a city commentator the other day, and we were talking about the recession and the recovery. So your friend, Mr. Haldane there, I was quite rude about it the other day, which I'll have to apologise now that I know you know him. But he was talking about a V-shaped recovery. And then but my thing was, how far back does it come back up the V? We've adopted, rightly or wrongly, the swoosh. We have to say Nike just in case they claim it. So the swoosh, and then there was a quite a worrying one. I don't know if you saw it, the K recovery the other day, where the affluent are okay, but the poorer get poorer, as is often the way. But in this particular instance, where the economy is going, and unfortunately what looks like to be pretty high levels of unemployment here. In terms of where you sit, and your experiences, David, how do you have any idea on timeline on how this is going to work, this recession? It's very hard, I know, because it's a completely different type of recession. The world stops. It's never done that before. It stopped in its tracks, full stop. But what are your sort of views, as it were, how you see any form of recovery here?
Yeah, Andy's a friend, but I have to admit that when I saw him push the V-shaped recovery so early, I was amazed. I didn't concur with that. He's obviously a very, very smart guy, but I think that's well over optimistic. I don't think it allows for what is going to happen at the end of October and for the 6 months as we go into winter. Now, I think everything changes if you get a vaccine that works, obviously. But that notwithstanding, I'd be much more inclined to think about a U-shaped, a longer bottomed recovery, less linear, more like that. Because I think two things will happen. If we don't get a vaccine, I think eventually we will get bored with this.
Yes.
I literally think we will get bored with it. And I think a few things are, and this is my personal opinion entirely.
Absolutely.
I think we are far more close to the herd than we know.
Yes.
I had it in March. I know people who had it back in December, January. I travel to China all the time. And I just do not, I think something really odd happened to us as a world. If you look at the numbers in aggregate, they compare to car crashes, they compare to malaria, they compare to all other things.
Unfortunately, to suicides.
That we live with on a daily basis.
Suicides are way up there.
Yeah, and I'm still a little bit baffled by what has happened here, really, to be honest. I accept what it is, and I do not want to demean the value of a human life, but at the same time, something really strange happened to us, and I think largely through social media and a generation of politicians who listen to their audience rather than lead their audience. And we were led into this peculiar situation where you daren't argue and fight about it. I think the governments did a very good job at scaring people witless, and such that we don't bounce back very quickly. And so I think that over time, and I don't know what that time is, I really don't, but notwithstanding a vaccine, I think we will slowly claw our way back of it, because we will literally get bored to death and start to push back against it slowly. Mm-hmm. One thing that really worries me, and why I screamed at the TV at Boris back in March, was in my career, I've got a lot of things right and a lot of things wrong. I've got an awful lot of things right, but my biggest problem in my trading career, I was always too early. I could get it right, put the trade on, be timed out, and then it would happen. It's equally as bad as getting it wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not claiming any skills here.
No.
But I do worry that a generation of children, and I call 18 to 28 years old, are going to wake up very soon and go, what on earth have you done to us?
Absolutely.
Because
they're going to be the guys who can take redundancies in the main here.
Absolutely.
It's going to, that concerns me. I mean, you've got the. Do you do much? I've got a question here. Do you do much on social media? I know you do a bit of Twitter.
I only use it for the charity. I don't use it for
but it's how quickly they can create storms, if you like, and literally about nothing. And they get there, there are people on that. I'm doing something on it next week. Strange enough, I'm saying that the people that are in the main on Twitter contribute the square root of bugger all generally in life. You know, the journalists want to be superstars and hopefully get on Strictly and all this other carry on, rather than doing their job. With that backdrop, and I think in terms of where the recession is going to go, next year's going to be very feral. I see it in terms of the business, because there's a massive unravelling. Going back to what you were saying about commercial buildings in our chat before, commercial, the high street is crazy. I was in Leeds yesterday. It was like a ghost town. The lovely thoroughfare there by Harvey Nicks. The top shops were empty or closed during COVID-19, when everything else was open. I think, like I say, I think what it's done to the economy is going to be crippling. But my fear is the younger people, like you say. And take it back to the NSPCC, David. We were speaking to Joanne McMaster there the other day, and she was saying the worst thing was when it started, it was quiet, which the NSPCC know it's not good news if it's quiet. Now they're getting a flood of calls, and it goes back, and I know you more than reinforce this. This is where the NSPCC is so important. The effects this is going to have on various bits of all of our young people is going to be pretty hard to take.
I still, and this is, you have to be careful in the way this sounds, but again, taking care, I understand what it's like to lose people in the family.
Mm-hmm.
I get that. But when you look at the way we have reacted as a country to 0.057% of the population, and you put that in context with all the other things that are killing people on a day-to-day basis, whether it be cancer, malaria, diabetes, car crashes, you can go on forever. 25,000, 30,000 people die a day of starvation in the world.
Absolutely.
The way we reacted to such a low number of deaths, and that's where it gets a bit touchy with people, because they don't accept any death. That's where we've made the mistake, in my opinion. We need to move on, tighten up our pants, and get on with life before there's too much damage.
Absolutely.
I fear our politicians and our government don't have that at the forefront of their mind. I think they're starting to wake up to the repercussions of their actions, which they will largely say they had no choice. I disagree on that. I think they did choices, they just didn't like those choices. But I do think that we're very likely to have a whole generation, if we're not very, very careful, marching the streets for 6 months.
Absolutely.
And a whole lot of social disorder on the horizon when the money dries up, the sun goes.
Yes.
And, they really do get that moment when they realize their future isn't a future.
No, because that was something, again, we're going to be talking next week, because we're continually told how weak everybody is. As humans, we're not weak, but I think we get to a stage, especially younger people, saying to old man, just wittering away. We're not, but it's that thing where people have been battered to tell them how useless we are. I think a lot of people's defences are down. Good news is not news. It doesn't make anywhere. There's, I think it's Professor Carroll on there. He's quite good on the stats every day. It's compared to last week and everything else. And he's trying to live that. But the amount of stick that man's getting for dare to say there could be some good news in this, he's been trolled.
Isn't that that's a really incredible, very good point. That I don't understand why a few months ago we had 2,000 deaths a day, and now we have. Now they've dropped that, and now it's about the infections, and infections have risen by 100%. You suddenly hear,
yes,
they've gone from 1,000 a day to 10, and they go from 10 to 20, and the media report that as 100% increase with no
Absolutely.
reference to the absolutes or the nominals. It's all, and I'm bewildered as to why they're incentivized to do that. Where's their upside to report it in such manner? And why is there no reference to the fact that the death rates have fallen? And why is nobody ever telling us or speaking out loud about the fact that most of the intensive cares have no COVID patients in them, and all those lovely, fantastically well-built emergency hospitals we did sat idle?
We've got one in Harrogate here. It's not been used in anger at all.
Yeah, we went from the idea of running the economy alongside the infection to, oh my God, we can't have any of it.
Yeah.
Which is clearly untenable. And now they've got to try and paint themselves out of a corner. And they've got to try and tell the world that the bubonic plague they told us it was isn't. And please go back to work. The one good thing to come out of this, from my perspective, is I suddenly realized that working from home does work. My entire team have worked brilliantly. And the Freudian thing, that smirk everybody used to give you when you said you're having a working from home today.
Absolutely.
It's no longer going to occur. And I'm really facing the prospect of never commuting to London again right now. My commuting will be flying when that comes back, because I have to. And I've got 5 centres I can rid myself of. But, maybe we congregate for, as I think it was termed the other day in the newspaper, a hugathon once a month, where we all go.
Absolutely. Very, very important. We allowed one hug when we got back to the office. We're doing 3-2. 3 days in the office too, and there's the rota there, so you can spread out and do what you've got to do. The other thing that from it, Dave, we've been doing quite a bit, because I say most of our clients are SME. We're taking a twofold approach to them, so they come with us with debt pressures, whatever form they take. But what we're suggesting they go and do, they go and check the validity of their business in today's world, which sounds very patronising, but it's becoming more apparent. For instance, gyms. And there are quite a few gyms were sold on franchise models, which are fairly tight. You had to go and get the footfall to make sure you kept your numbers up there. When it goes down like that, where's the validity in your business? And so to go and check the validity. One guy's already got, and he's doing okay. So we've got his dollop of debt to deal with, if you like, various issues there. He's reinvented himself, for want of a better phrase, as a personal trainer online. Doesn't need 4 walls and 200 grand a kit and franchise fees. And when it worked, it worked. When it didn't, it's a bit like the airline industry. I think Warren Buffett said it is not a vaccine by the middle of next year. That's it for aerospace.
Well, I went to the gym for the very first time this morning, and I was confronted with a peculiar situation. I think is important. The machines were alternated. They put a cross on every other machine, as an example. Yet those machines were still 1.5 meters apart. Even if they used them all. So I came around to the manager I know well, and I said, how come you've put a cross on every other machine? He said, so I can maintain the distancing. I said, but your distancing with them is within the limits. And he said, no, 2 meters. And I said, the limit is 1 meter minimum, not 2 anymore. He said, really?
That's some information. We'll put it down in information overload.
It's funny, And I said, your job should be squeezing those rules like a Formula 1 team to win their lives to stay viable, not being authoritarian, which is another interesting aspect.
That's going, isn't it?
How many people have leapt into the opportunity to exert pressure on others?
I got a mild bollocking from a lady the other day because I was off. I wasn't standing on my circle in B&Q. There's a sign of how I spend my weekends. But because I wasn't right on the circle. Excuse me, sir. Excuse me. Yes. Could you just get it? If it was 6 inches away, it'd been a long distance, but it did this. Anyway, let's get off that. Right, Mr. Tait, we're going to let you go on the set, but we have to check that you are a human being and not a robot. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions here. If you can, 1 or 2 word answers. Okay. So, Apple or Android?
Apple.
All day, everything Apple?
Everything, I'm afraid. Once you're locked in, it's like a virus.
You're hooked. 2 social media platforms you would use in the main. I know you say you do it mainly for charity. 2 social media platforms you would use. Yes, it's Facebook and Instagram, I guess. Okay, good. The sport of your choice? Formula 1. Very good. You watched yesterday? I take it. I'm an addict. I can't help it. He may have his statins away, isn't he? You wouldn't want to see him in your wing mirror, would you? I tried to drive cars
back in the day, and I was reasonably okay, but those guys are beyond belief. So I know how hard it is.
I thought you were going to say I drive my car like that now, and I was just going to say, well, cut that bit out, David, just to protect you from the police there. The last time you took your plane up, I know you've got a wee plane there.
Yesterday, I flew to Le Touquet with Vanessa. We had lunch on the beach. It was 36 degrees, unbearable, but it was a fantastic flight.
Brilliant, brilliant. You didn't get down to Deauville for a bit of racing as well for the full first world problem.
No, it was a lovely day, and it's a 40-minute flight, and you know, we go everywhere together. We pack small little bags in the back, and off we go.
How long did it take to get there, David?
It was 45 minutes door to door, and we're off to Cornwall on Wednesday for 2 or 3 days, and
very good.
Yeah, we fly everywhere.
Brilliant. Next holiday,
Portugal on the 23rd. I'm defying the COVID rules and just going and worrying about it when I get back. Hopefully, I'll have an air bridge.
An air bridge, or you have nothing else to do for 14 days. That would be one.
Well, when I get back, I'll be working from home like I am now. It makes no difference to me.
That's cool. Right. Red or white?
Red.
Wine. Red.
Wine.
Right.
Wine. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Wine. White wine.
White wine.
Yeah.
White wine. A couple of bottles of. Then 2 ones I want you to help me with. One last one. Yeah, I'm your fairy godmother. You're having a dinner party. Who would be the most entertaining guest you'd ask? Not necessarily brain matter, but it can be. It doesn't matter. But who would? So, for instance, mine would be Billy Connolly. Dave Mester could be a hoot.
What's his name? The comedian from Carshare. Names.
Oh, Peter Kay.
Peter Kay. If I had one guest, I'd like to come, Peter Kay.
It'd be a great taxi driver as well, wouldn't he?
That would be such a funny name. Yeah.
Very good. Last one. It's something. We're doing a few of these podcasts now. Is there anyone you suggest we should contact? Again, with the context, we're trying to cut through the BS, get people who know nearly what they're talking about. Any suggestions?
Yes, Sir Michael Spencer.
All right, very good.
That would be a good one. And
right.
Michael Spencer. Yes, and an actor, Alistair Petrie.
Right.
Alistair Petrie, he was the tall guy from the film, My Boss.
I saw him on Sunday Brunch. He was very good.
Hugely entertaining character.
Yeah.
Life and soul of a party. He would give you such fun on this podcast, and very smart, and a hugely kind friend of mine now.
We'll try, so I can name drop and say, man, Tait said that's cool.
Please, I'd be happy to set that one up.
He said you've never rejected anything at 17. That's cool, no problem at all. I'm going to leave you, David, but just I mentioned Dame Esther there in terms of that. She came when she was in Belfast. She came over she was on tour anyway, but she came then. She was telling some lovely anecdotes, and she was talking about completely different to the NSPCC. She was saying that she's quite good friends with Joan Collins. And Joan Collins, so it said Dame Esther was with her one evening. It was husband, whatever it is, but the last one, who apparently is a younger man. And Dame Esther said to her, "What about the age gap?" And Joan Collins said, "If he dies, darling, he dies." So on that happy note, thank you very much, Dave, for your time. It's brilliant to catch up with you there. We'll send you, obviously it's not box seal, but we keep you posted on our little efforts there, and keep going with the great work for the NSPCC and brilliant stuff with the Gold Council there, bringing it into the 21st century.
Doing my best. I might find myself hanging by something under Blackfriars Bridge when one of these gold miners or somebody doesn't like what I'm doing. I find myself in a concrete shoes.
keep moving, David. You'll be fine. Keep moving.
Right,
Good luck. Thanks again, David.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye. Thank you.